This is BBC News. These are the latest headlines in the UK and around the world. Ukraine warns that Russia is preparing a fresh offensive in the Donbass region in the east of the country. Its foreign minister calls on NATO for more help.
My agenda is very simple. It has only 3 items on it. It's weapons, weapons and weapons.
Going nuclear. The UK government puts nuclear power at the heart of its new energy strategy. It wants 8 new reactors approved by the end of the decade.
What we've launched today is a strategy. So what it does is that it brings a measure of energy independence, security of supply to the UK.
New research suggests people are at an increased risk of developing serious blood clots for up to 6 months after having COVID-19. The first African-American woman to be nominated for the US Supreme Court could be confirmed later today. And the day the dinosaurs died, scientists say they've found fossils of creatures killed when a giant asteroid hit the Earth and led to the mass extinction. Hello and welcome if you're watching in the UK or around the world. The Ukrainian government has warned that Russian forces are amassing ahead of a new offensive aimed at the east of the country, and its foreign minister has appealed to NATO to supply more weapons to counter it. Thousands of people are trying to escape the Donbass region ahead of Russia's expected attack. Well, let's go through some of the main developments in the war in Ukraine. Ukrainian officials are appealing to people in the Donbass region to take this opportunity to flee while it's safe. Russian troops are regrouping for an offensive in Donbass, which is made up of the regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. The US says that Russia's withdrawal from the regions outside Kyiv and Chernihiv is now complete as the war shifts focus to eastern Ukraine. Meanwhile, NATO foreign ministers are resuming discussions in Brussels this morning on how best to arm Ukraine. The UK and the US have announced more sanctions which they hope will stem the funds flowing to Moscow. Ukraine's foreign minister has issued what he termed a very simple call for more weapons from NATO countries to help save lives, as Simon Jones reports. Well, let's get the latest from our correspondent Emma Vardy, who's in Lviv in western Ukraine. Emma, Ukrainian officials have been telling people in the Donbass region to flee while it's safe. But do we know how long they have? Is there any indication of when the Russian forces may attack? Emma, thank you. Emma Vardy in Lviv for us. And a quick reminder, we'll be taking your questions on the war in Ukraine in a little over an hour's time. We'll have guests able to answer a range of aspects of the war, from how it's being fought, how it may end, and the human consequences. You can get in touch with us on Twitter using the hashtag #BBCYourQuestions, and you can email us your questions at yourquestions@bbc.co.uk. The UK government has unveiled its much-delayed energy strategy, which seeks to reduce reliance on imported fuel by boosting domestic power generation. It says up to 8 nuclear reactors could be approved by the end of the decade, with the aim of meeting a quarter of demand. There's also an ambition for offshore wind to produce enough energy to power every British home by 2030. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the strategy would help the UK enjoy greater self-sufficiency with cheaper bills. Opposition parties, though, have warned there's nothing to help families who are struggling with rising energy costs now. Our political correspondent, Ione Wells, looks at the main details. Well, let's talk to the BBC's energy and environment analyst, Roger Harrabin. Roger, the UK produces far less nuclear energy than many other countries, for example, France, Ukraine, Germany. Does this strategy go far to change that? Well, Roger, thank you for going through that with us. That's Roger Harrabin. Well, joining us now is Tom Greatrex, who's the Chief Executive of the UK Nuclear Industry Association. Thank you for joining us. Now, first of all, given how long it takes to build them, do you think the UK government has been slow off the mark in its focus on more nuclear? Well, Tom, thank you. That's Tom Greatrex from the UK Nuclear Industry Association. A study from Sweden suggests that after a COVID infection, there's an increased risk of developing a serious blood clot for the next 6 months. The research found people with severe COVID and those infected during the first wave had the highest clot risk. Researchers say that this highlights the importance of being vaccinated against the virus. Well, let's talk to one of the researchers involved in this study, Anne-Marie Fors-Connolly, who's Principal Study Investigator from Umeå University in Sweden. Thank you so much for joining us. First of all, talk us through the overview of the findings of this study. Well, Anne-Marie, thank you so much for joining us and for going through that there. That's Anne-Marie Fors-Connolly.
Thank you.
In the US, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson will make history as the first African-American woman to be appointed to the 9-member US Supreme Court. The 51-year-old will replace Stephen Breyer, who retires later this year. She's expected to be confirmed by a narrow majority in the Senate. Here's our Washington correspondent, Nomia Iqbal. The UK Chancellor Rishi Sunak is coming under political pressure after his wife confirmed she has non-domicile status, which means she doesn't have to pay any UK tax on any foreign income. Akshata Murthy is an Indian citizen and is the daughter of the man who founded one of India's biggest companies, Infosys. It's understood Mr. Sunak made the government aware of his wife's tax status when he became a minister in 2018. Our political correspondent Ian Watson told me that the controversy was more about perception than any actual wrongdoing. Our correspondent Ian Watson there. Now, here's an interesting story for you. It's widely believed that dinosaurs were wiped out after a huge asteroid crashed into the Earth 66 million years ago, but no one's ever found the remains of a dinosaur killed in the impact. Until now, that is. Scientists may have uncovered direct evidence which tells them much more about what happened on the day of the collision. Settle back and enjoy this report from our science editor, Rebecca Morell. Incredible, isn't it? You're watching BBC News. Let's return now to our top story. A close ally of President Zelensky has accused Western countries of cowardice for not giving more military support to the Ukrainian army. As Russian troops are repositioning in the east to launch a new attack, there's growing frustration among Ukrainians over the stance of some of its allies. Our World Affairs editor John Simpson reports from Lviv. More now on the UK government publishing its new energy strategy, which includes plans for 8 new nuclear reactors by the end of the decade. Ministers say there'll be more reliance on wind, solar and hydrogen, but they've stressed they would seek community approval before building onshore wind farms. The UK Energy Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng said the government was determined to help tackle the cost of rising energy bills. A British man who died in a landslide alongside his 9-year-old son in Australia's Blue Mountains has been named. Mirab Nazir, who was 49, worked as a lawyer for a firm in Singapore. His wife and another son are in hospital. Phil Mercer reports. It's almost 3 years now since a devastating fire tore through Paris's Notre Dame Cathedral. A massive restoration project is well underway to return it to its former glory. But in the meantime, you can go to a new exhibition where virtual reality will show you the cathedral's future and its past. The BBC's Tim Ullman has more. Let's take a quick look at some of the day's other news now. Colombia's Supreme Court has approved the extradition to the United States of the accused drug lord Dairo Antonio Usaga. Until his capture in October last year, he was the country's most wanted drug trafficker and the leader of the country's biggest criminal gang. Yemen's president has dismissed his vice president and irreversibly delegated his own powers to a presidential council. President Hadi said the council would carry out duties for the government. The announcement removes some of the obstacles to efforts to revive negotiations on ending the country's 7-year civil war. In other news now, in Peru, a protester has been killed and several people injured in clashes with police. People there have been taking to the streets for several days now, demonstrating against the rising cost of fuel and food. The protesters were blocking a major highway in the south of the country, as Shelley Phelps reports. The Ukrainian group Kalush Orchestra are the favourites to win Eurovision next month. Later on Thursday, they'll be making their first international performance since the invasion of Ukraine. The 6 members of the band were given special permission to go to Israel for a pre-Eurovision concert, as men of military age are otherwise banned from leaving the country. The BBC's Middle East correspondent Yolande Nell went to meet them. Well, let's leave you now with some animals being released back into the wild in Colombia. Have a look. This anteater is one of more than 160 animals released by wildlife officials after a crackdown on animal trafficking. 15 different species were released, including snakes, turtles, and even a leopard. The animals were nurtured back to health by vets working for the government before being reintroduced to their natural habitats in the lagoons and forests to the east of the capital, Bogota. Animal trafficking is a persistent problem in Colombia, one of the most biodiverse countries in the world. There you go. We wanted to, oh, look at that. That is adorable. We have to leave you with some cute animals and a positive story. But do stay with us here because we have plenty more still to come, including the headlines at the top of the hour. So stay with us here on BBC News.